Welcome back, guys, to Let's Plaster a Pool. Today we're going to discuss the compressor and air hammer needed for the demolition. When looking for an air compressor or to purchase, your first stop is the air tool section. I know it seems backwards, but the air tool decides the compressor you will need. When looking at air tools in general, there are two main parameters that need to be considered. The first being PSI, or pounds per square inch, and the other being SCFM, or standard cubic feet per minute. There's also a third parameter specific to air hammers and cutting tools, which is BPM, or blows per minute, otherwise known as impacts per minute. I chose a medium barreled air hammer rated at 90 psi, which is standard, with a slower BPM of 3000. The hammer also had an air requirement of 4 SCFM. The slower BPM gives the air hammer more power when chiseling. The piston speed is slower, but the impact to the chisel is greater. The slower BPM also allows for greater control of the air hammer. I do not know or could not find any information regarding a performance difference between the long barrel and the medium barrel air hammers. If you have some experience with this, please leave a comment below. At this point, the information given is from research after I purchased my compressor. Now that I know the requirements of the air hammer, ideally this is what I would have chosen if budget was not an issue and I had the hindsight that I have now. The parameter we need to look at on the compressor is the SCFM rating at a specified PSI. Remember, for my air hammer, it operates at 4 SCFM at 90 PSI. So I need to have an air compressor that has a greater SCFM at the same PSI. Ideally, you would want an SCFM rating to be double what the tool needs. For example, my air hammer, I would want an 8 to 10 SCFM at 90 PSI. Gasoline air compressors achieve this requirement with little effort from the customer, as in pay the $600 or $700 and put the gas in. The great thing about gasoline air compressors is that they are portable. Electric air compressors have a more difficult time producing that requirement because they are limited to voltage they're rated for and the voltage you have at the plug. For example, this stationary electric air compressor is rated for 230 volts and draws 15 amps. This compressor, with efficiency loss calculated in by the manufacturer, produces 3.7 horsepower. This amount of horsepower produces 11 SCFM at 90 psi. So what is the first problem you see in this ideal situation? The voltage requirement of 230 volts is going to be difficult to provide in a normal home. In my home, I can only think of two places that has a 240 volt plug. That is the washing machine area and the refrigerator area. The second issue, which might not be a problem with a little more research, is the stationary nature of the air compressor. So that leads us to the compressor that I bought, based upon my budget and the lack of 240 volt plugs. The air compressor I went with had a rating of 5.1 SCFM at 90 psi, using 120 volts. Now you might be wondering if it is possible to find an electric air compressor that it produces 3 to 4 horsepower at 120 volts. And the answer, according to my research, is no. The short explanation is that the most you can get out of a 120 volt compressor is 2 horsepower. That is because of efficiency, amp rating of the wire and breaker, and the fact that it is 120 volts. If you would like a more detailed explanation of the reason, let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, well, let's look at the compressor in a real world situation and see if you can hold up to the job of plaster demolition. Alright guys, let me give you a real world experience on how this setup works, how my setup works. First of all, you're going to need safety glasses And of course you need a respirator at all times. With plaster dust, it does get kind of fine, and it will go up in the air, so a little bit. So you don't want to breathe that stuff in. So make sure you get a good respirator mask. They cost like $40. They come with the cartridges. So anyways, let me show you how it looks. We got a good to have a quick connect, and of course you want to get pneumatic oil too, and that goes in the tool every time you use it. Okay, so this is what I bought separately, but they were just standard chisels. Okay, so let's try out this combination, and then I'll show you how well it works. So I'm working opposite normal because I need a shot for the camera. So. Alright, so you can see there that worked pretty well. And it took off the old plaster. It took off the plaster that was very loose. And all this other plaster, this stuff's on there. I mean, I could probably go over it a little more, but when I use my pressure washer, if there's anything that's just hanging on just because, the pressure washer is going to take this off. But the rest of this is strong. This is strong plaster that you can replaster over. Okay. What we're trying to get is the stuff that's loose and not adhering to the shell anymore, not adhering to the gunite. So yeah. So those two combinations worked, even though technically speaking it was far from ideal. That compressor that I bought, it still works.